Hi there. In this video I will show you how to turn any image into a seamless texture. So how do we set this up? First, add the image as a plane. Shift A image mesh plane and let's turn on render preview. Open a new workspace, shader editor and delete the principal material, we don't need it, and add an emission shader instead. Plug the image back in and the base shading is done. Then let's add a camera. I'll move it up 2 meters and go to the settings and select orthographic. Hit numpad 0 for camera view and change the orthographic scale until the camera borders line up with the edges of the image. The aspect ratio is probably off as well, and by hitting N we can find the object dimensions. Here we can see that we have a 1 meter by 1.43 meters, so for the camera aspect ratio, which we'll set in the render settings, we'll set the horizontal resolution to 1080 times the dimension of the plane. And we have a perfect fit for the image borders. Next we will duplicate the image with Shift D and I'll move it up 10 centimeters for clarity. I'll click the number 2 next to the material to create a unique material for this one, and I will rename it Fade. And then I'll add a gradient node, set it to spherical and use the mapping node to move it 0.5 on all axes to center it to the plane. Then I'll add a color ramp to bring the black borders in, and I'll use this gradient to drive a mix shader node, and I'll set the black value to a transparent shader and use the image emission as the white area. And now when you move the plane you can see how the pattern moves and covers the edges. Now I'll move this first plane 0.5 meters on the y-axis to line it up with the top. I'll duplicate it with Alt D and move that -1 meters on the y-axis. And then I duplicate and repeat until I have one for each of the 4 edges as well as the 4 corners. I'll use the width value of the plane dimension divided by 2 so the side edges match perfectly with the edges of the original image. I recommend moving each new pair up a few centimeters to avoid Z fighting and keeping things more readable. The most important thing is that you keep the same rotation for each of the opposites, and all of the 4 corners need to be the same. Now you can fine tune the fade shader, add a noise texture to break up the gradient edges, and so on. If you add a noise texture, make sure to set the Z scale to 0 so that the noise behaves as a 2D texture. Now when you're happy with it, we're ready to export. The most important thing is to scroll all the way down in the render settings and set the color management to sRGB standard to make sure the colors are exactly as they were in the original image. Then we can bump up the sample count and even the noise threshold and render. Save it as a PNG to your texture folder and you're done. A reusable, tileable and seamless texture. Let me know what you think about the video and thank you for watching.